Welcome, Colette. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to learning more about transactions management and the role of transactions in commercial real estate.
I'm Colette English Dixon. I'm the Executive Director of the Marshall Bennett Institute of Real Estate at Roosevelt University. But before I started that role, I had more than 20 years in real estate transactions for Prudential, a global investment management company.
I have a treat for you today. I have Colette English Dixon with us, and you are going to enjoy this so much. Colette, tell us a little bit about your current role and what you do.
Well, Trish, it is so nice to be here. Thank you so much. It's like so cool. So my current role is that I oversee the real estate academic programs at Roosevelt University. So what does that mean, right? Like, what the heck does that mean? It means that really everything that is involved with our real estate curriculum, the courses, the faculty, how do we raise money to support what we do at the Institute? Because we're actually a freestanding institute at the university. It's called the Marshall Bennett Institute of Real Estate here in Chicago. And we are really charged with educating the future leaders in the real estate industry for Chicago. So I do everything, but I don't teach, which is really important. I don't teach. I'm not.
And that is fair. And
Thanks.
that is fair. So what you do very well is transactions. So tell us
Yeah.
about what that was when you were doing that.
You know, transactions is really a fun part of the business. I think that of everything in the commercial real estate space, there are two disciplines that are like the drivers behind what really happens at the end of the day. One is the development side, right? Because everybody wants to be a developer, right? When they learn about this industry, they get really fascinated about being a developer.
That's right.
Really important. But equally as dynamic, equally as engaging in the industry is the transaction side. And I think that a lot of people don't understand it, so they don't necessarily think that's a path that they could or would want to pursue. So that's about buying, identifying and buying real estate, commercial real estate assets, properties, wherever they may be. And there's a wide range of those, right? And I'm sure you've talked about those. I mean, all the different property types in the industry.
Right.
So there's that part, which is really cool because it's an opportunity to add to a portfolio, to bring more income in the door for an investor. And then the other side of it is being engaged in the sale of those. And while the sale of real property isn't always seen to be quite as sexy as buying it, right?
Very true.
It is equally as important for different reasons.
Because
Because that sale can be important for either getting the profits out of the property that you bought, you know, actually kind of proving to yourself that you made a good deal, right? Because you can sell it for more than what you bought it for. Or it's an opportunity to make a change in your portfolio, and that portfolio being a number of different properties that you've bought over time. Sometimes you go, it's time to let that one go. You know, it's not performing the way we think it should, or it's in a location that we don't think we should be in anymore, right? And we've seen a lot of that happening, especially over the past 18 months, where people are like, you know, that shopping center that we own somewhere, maybe we need to let that go. Well, the person who's responsible for that is on the disposition side, and their job is to help figure out the best way to market that property, to hire a broker, a JLL or a CBRE, or you know, any number of other firms, and find themselves a new owner. And another reason why you might be selling a property could be, you know, it's been a great relationship with this partner. It's time for us to move on. So it, to me, is equally as important because of the outcome that you can have when you're selling a property.
Right.
But, you know, the buying of the property is like the sexier side of the coin on that one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And you did both.
I did both.
So
I did
you have all
both.
that experience.
Fortunately, not often at the same time. Because it's, you know, there was a time when I started my career, you did both. It was, you had a part of the country you were responsible for, and whatever the opportunity was to buy or to sell something you already owned, you did both. As the company I was with grew, as you grew with more money to buy with, and you also had more properties you might want to sell, it was hard to keep it straight. The mindset that you have when you buy properties is very different than the one you have when you're selling them. And you will find that in most, reasonable, I probably say medium to large size real estate companies, many times people do one or the other.
Okay.
They don't do both.
So that brings us to a great question. What skills do you need to actually be in transactions management, the buying and or the selling side of this business?
You need to be able to juggle. There's so many things that you are involved in. When you're buying a property, I would say that the skill sets are comfort with numbers, because you have to feel comfortable with analyzing the specifics of that property, right? How much income is coming in? How much does it cost to run that property? What is the opportunity to either improve the income that you're getting or reduce the expenses that you have to pay out? You have to be able to communicate clearly, both verbally and written. Oftentimes you have to discuss what's going on with your investor, or you have to have conversations with the broker who's representing the seller of that property. You have to be really clear in your questions. You have to be a good listener, so you're hearing the things that maybe are obvious in those conversations. And then oftentimes you've got to write this out. There are investment reports, actually those requests for funds that you have to take to your investor client to go, this is the property I think we should buy. This is why I think we should buy it. And hopefully have a convincing argument on paper that then you can back up in a conversation in order to get that money, right? You also, I'd say, need to be able to multitask. Now, I do want to also say multitasking is sometimes a figment of our imagination. We think we're actually doing that, and we're really not doing that. But there are contracts to read, there are negotiations to have, there are services to manage, there is the internal communication, the external communication. There are always so many things going on, and usually they're going on at the same time, which is just really crazy. So you have to be well organized. Losing track of any part of that can really undermine your outcomes.
Right.
I remember one of the first deals I ever did on the sales side. It was the biggest property I think I was responsible for to that point in time. And there was a tenant, someone who was having their offices in this office building in Miami, who was having some issues with paying their rent, and I missed that. And it wound up being a really big deal to get that straight before we were able to actually close that transaction and complete that sale. And if I had paid more attention, if I had been better at prioritizing the things I needed to do, recognizing I had multiple things going on at the same time, I might not have missed that, and it might not have cost us quite as much if I had paid more attention to it. So the ability to really multitask, to have a lot of things going on at once, being able to prioritize those is really, really key.
Wow. So Colette, tell us about, I'm going to ask you two questions here. We're going to chase each other. So one, what did you study in school that you believe helped you in this particular career? And then I'm going to chase that with what the day-to-day looked like when you first got started in this career.
Oh, wow. So I have an undergraduate degree in finance and business economics. And did it really prepare me for this career? I think it did because I'm comfortable with numbers.
Yes. That's
Okay,
important.
so the part of the industry I've been in has always had numbers as a key aspect of it. I mean, there are parts of the industry you can be in where numbers are not the most important thing, but I've always been in that space where numbers are really a big deal. So that was really helpful. Now, did it help me with the other stuff? The ability to prioritize and multitask and all those other things? Maybe not so much. Now, one of the great things about this industry is that you really can learn and develop a lot of skills on the job.
Okay, OJT, on the job training is how we call that.
Yes, it's like have somebody throw you in the pool and you learn to swim. I mean, it can be really challenging, right? I mean, because you're like, what don't I know?
Right.
And the answer is most things. But, how can I pick this up? Where can I pick up these skills? So there's not any one educational path that prepares you for everything in this industry, right? You can be the great people person and, engager like you are, Trish. I mean, you are the ultimate communicator and engager with people. You do that so much better than many people I know. Or there are people who are really quantitatively focused. They get the numbers. That is really where they are. There are people who have incredible negotiation skills. I mean, some people I think are just born negotiators. Most of us think our children are that way because they come out like negotiating everything. It's amazing how you can lose that talent as you get older. But I mean, so that's a skill set you don't learn that in school.
Right, that's very true.
So a lot of the things that we do learn in school can address one piece. But the biggest thing that we learn in school is to be able to learn.
The greatest thing we learn in school is the ability to learn. And so that's something that a lot of different majors in college can teach you. So let's keep that in mind as we're choosing our career. And specifically, we're talking about transactions management today. And so now tell us what that day-to-day looks like for you. Like, what when you first got started, what did it look like?
When I first got started in the transaction space,
Yes.
Wow, that was a long time ago, Trish. Oh, it's really one of the great things about being in transactions, in my opinion, is that you have this great split between being in the office and being on the road, being out in the market. I was really fortunate. I started my career in Atlanta. So a lot of what I had done prior to becoming a transactions person had really set me up to understand where I could get information about things. And sometimes that meant going out and meeting with brokers or meeting with, property owners or meeting with property managers, and that was a really important part of the role I had before I moved into transactions. I did not realize that continued to be an important part of my job for the rest of my career. It was really key to being able to understand what's going on with the property we might be looking to buy, or to better understand what's going on with the property we're talking about selling. So my days, there was probably 60% of my time was in the office and 40% was out in the market.
That's important.
And that was actually really cool.
Right.
You got a chance to kind of get out and, kick the tires, because one of the things that really attracts people to this business is it's real, right?
Yes.
You can see it, you can touch it,
Right.
You can walk through it and just see everything that's going on. And so you have to do that on the transaction side.
Right.
Even if you're a junior person on the team, and maybe even more so when you're a junior person on the team, is being able to get out into the marketplace and to visit buildings and to see what's going on the ground. Because back in the day, we didn't have Google Earth. I mean, you couldn't just. It was a game changer. I mean, you had to really get out there. You had to really fly to Miami or fly to Orlando or whatever that was about to really see these buildings, because there was no other way to do it. Now, yes, you can pull it up on Google Earth, spin it around, kind of see what's going on, and that helps a lot. but it's still not the same thing.
No, it's still great to get out and touch it.
Oh, really? It is just amazing how much more you can learn about an area or learn about a building by being there.
Right. In real estate, it's all about that. It's about being able to see it, touch it, feel it, see who's around it, what is impacting it, and where the neighborhood is going just based on walking through it. So that's a great part of commercial real estate, is really getting out there and exploring. For all of you who don't want to be a desk on a consistent basis.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me, that was really the thing that kind of wed me to this industry, was that opportunity to do that.
Yes.
And I don't want anybody to think you can do this remotely well. For a long period of time, you cannot do that. There is nothing like standing on the corner and really seeing what's going on around a property that you own or a property you might want to own, or just to understand kind of the whole marketplace.
Yes.
Just as a sidebar, it's like lately through the pandemic, they were talking about how many people were buying homes without actually seeing them. And they were relying on like Google Earth or some other sort of drone flyby of a building.
Right.
And I'm just like, it's a big bet. I mean, it's not a great way to really feel what's going on.
Agreed.
And in the commercial real estate space, we're talking a lot of money. And even for the smallest investment, it's a lot of money. And it is really important, I think, to be on the ground. So having the ability to kind of do both, to be in the office, especially when you're starting your career, so you can tap into the experience of the people you're working with. You can, walk next door and go, I don't understand this. I mean, can you help me understand what this is doing or what this is saying? Reading contracts, I spent half my time talking to the lawyers in the office, kind of going, what is this about? Help me understand this. Learning how to read leases. There's a lot of this business that you can learn at a desk. And there's a lot of this business that you need to learn on the street.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I loved being in the transaction side more than being on the asset management side or some other things that you can do is because virtually every day is different.
Yes, that's very exciting.
Very different. And the importance, back to my multitasking priority thing, right?
Yes.
The importance of what you need to do in that different day is going to shift every day. Today is contract day, or today is underwriting day. I mean, those are really big parts of what we do in this business. And the fact that every day has some of it, probably, in some portion or another, really kept me interested. I think I actually determined probably at some point in my career I had some form of adult ADD. I mean, it was, there were people who say that transactions people have very short attention spans. That's not really true.
There's a lot to think about.
But there's a lot to think about.
Yes.
And it's like once you get the deal done, you move on to the next one. It's not like trying to rethink it 10 times. You don't have the time to do that. But I like that it was really dynamic. There was always something going on, and it was always a different day.
Nice.
Even even in the early years.
Okay.
And of course, as you get further in your career, every day is still different. But you may not have as much involvement in like the underwriting part, trying to figure out how much something is worth. You may be looking over someone else's work rather than doing it yourself. That's one of the great things about, experience in the industry or moving up in your role, is that some of those things that you had to do as an early career person in transactions, you did it all, or you touched almost all of it. And you touched it in detail. As you move up, some of those things become less important on your list of things to do, and other things will increase, in their importance and your responsibility. But yeah, that was that kind of every day being different, really fun.
Wow, that's really, really exciting. So I'd love to hear about, what was the title role? So if someone was going to get on LinkedIn or on one of these job boards online to look for a role within transactions, what might it be called?
Let's see. I would say you could be an acquisitions analyst. Okay.
Acquisitions analyst.
You could be a financial analyst.
Okay.
that would be the start. Analyst is usually part of the term.
Okay.
If it says asset management analyst, you may not be as close to the transactions as you want to be.
Okay.
Okay.
That's important.
If you are let's see, what would be another role? Portfolio analyst, another role that may be involved with transactions, but is not going to be as involved in it as you would be if you're like an acquisitions analyst.
Okay.
So I would look at that.
Okay.
And if you look at the details behind the job, there's always those bullet points. This is what you do. Look at, underwriting new investment opportunities or underwriting property disposition strategy. I mean, things that reference a buying or a selling should be noted in the job description if that's where you're going to be.
Okay. So now we know what to look for.
Yeah.
Okay. So now tell us, Colette. So we can talk a little bit more about the trajectory of this, starting salary in the 50,000s.
Yeah.
And then, but the upside to that is,
Well, that depends upon which kind of company you're working for.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay, so I think entry-level analyst roles in the industry right now are somewhere in the $60,000 a year.
Even better.
And that's with an undergraduate degree.
Okay.
And I would say, because what we do in this industry isn't rocket science, you could potentially get into this sort of role and into this sort of path coming from any number of business disciplines, business majors. You could be a math major. You could be an economics major. I guess I could say you could be an art history major because it has worked in the past. As long as you don't have a fear of numbers and you are really open to the continual learning thing, okay? So you start around 60 as an analyst. As you progress through your career with an institutional investor, like I worked for Prudential, it's considered an institution. And I think that's as much by its size as by the sort of real estate it buys.
Oh,
so, institutional investors tend to buy, office buildings, big apartment properties, big retail centers. They're bigger properties. And there is a real bias in the conversation around the industry to talk about what we do in that sort of scale. But really, that's the tip of the iceberg. There are so many properties that are smaller than what institutions buy. And there is a huge amount of potential in that smaller space because there's just a lot more of it, right? And you often are talking about smaller companies. You're talking about families that buy property. They're called family offices oftentimes, or small investor partnerships that might buy smaller things. But when you work for an institution, you almost always work on salary plus a bonus. There is very seldom anything that's like a commission or a part of the deal or anything like that, because usually institutions are spending the money that they raised from other institutions, like pension funds.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so they don't give up a part of the deal, but there is a bonus, and often bonus is based on performance and portfolio performance, your performance, the company's performance. It's a whole big ball. If you work for smaller companies, let me finish that one, because where do you top out?
Right.
It isn't endless. So you don't find people working for institutions on the transaction side generally making millions of dollars. I mean, because it just doesn't work that way. But you can make a very healthy living, and by the time you are 10 years in or whatever, you're somewhere in the mid 100s to $200,000 around base, maybe a little bit higher, with a bonus potential that could be 50% of your salary. So, that's potentially $300,000 a year, which is not that bad.
Right.
Not that bad. And it's also kind of a balance because you're not taking a lot of risk with that money either.
Right.
Right? Because you're working for an institution. You're not the person whose performance will, make or break because they did a bad deal. It's just not that way. When you get into more entrepreneurial platforms, I think that's where you can find that upside potential being a bit less limited. Okay? Because those firms are often able to give you a piece of a deal. So if the deal over time performs or outperforms, there's, and you sell it, there's additional money that comes your way. And sometimes that can be huge. Sometimes that can just be a huge thing. But you're not probably seeing that until you're in the business, 10 years or more. Okay. So you probably start out at about the same number. The competition for analysts is pretty intense. Everybody's paying about the same thing. Right. How quickly you move up in the company is maybe faster in a small firm. Okay. But there's a little more risk with that. And small firms, if there's a year where they're not doing particularly well with their investments, that can limit your bonus pretty dramatically. If you are, living on the promote being that extra piece of the return that you can get because you overperform. If you are really living on getting that extra piece, and it doesn't happen because you hit a pandemic and you can't sell things, or you wind up with a giant recession like we saw in 2009 and 2010, 8, 9, and 10, that can have a huge impact on that extra piece. Right. So, there is the potential, if you want to take more risk, to have a much less limited upside. But I don't think you find a lot of transactions people buying or selling, being the ones who will be reported as making millions of dollars unless it's their company. I mean, it's just if you're working for somebody else, it's probably not quite that lucrative. But you can make a very good living as an analyst, as an associate, as a vice president. You can make a very solid living if you're with a platform that has money, has been successful at raising money or has its own money, and you're successful in getting the transactions done.
Wow. So I've heard you say today, Colette, that there are some parts of the personality that would be helpful to someone in this career: the ability to multitask, the ability to maybe be outgoing and talk to people.
We don't have to be outgoing, but the ability to talk to people is really key.
Okay.
Okay.
Enough,
I mean, because they don't have to go together.
Yes, that's very true.
Okay.
That's very true. But tell us some more about who might be, what personality types might be good in a position as a transactions analyst.
Someone who has attention to detail is really important if you're an analyst to be able to look at the details. Because the details, missing the details, like I said before, like on my one deal early in my career, I missed a detail. Right. And it wound up being a fairly expensive miss. Fortunately not career ending, but it was an interesting conversation. And I just, I like to have people try to avoid those. Yes. Don't have things happen in difficult conversations because you forgot something. So you do have to have an attention to detail. It's the little things when you're underwriting. And underwriting meaning you're looking at all of the elements of this investment that could impact its value. So you are looking at the leases. You're trying to understand, when is this lease going to expire? Is the tenant likely to stay? How much is this tenant paying to help offset your costs, your expenses? Nothing, something, what are the caps on that? There are a lot of quantitative details that are expected to be reviewed by an analyst. And the analyst also needs to understand the software that we use. And that takes time. Nobody usually walks into being an analyst knowing how to run an Argus model, at least not undergrad. Or if they know what an Argus model is, they know just enough. There's always more to learn. So you have to feel comfortable with your, technology skills. You need to know Excel. You need to potentially have an understanding of artists, at least if someone says what it is, kind of say you know what it is, even if you haven't been working with it forever. You also need to be, again, able to communicate and willing to ask questions. I find that a lot of young people, when they start their careers, are afraid to ask questions because they're afraid that that means that there's something they don't know, or it'll appear that they don't know something that they should.
Mm-hmm.
No one expects an analyst to walk in the door knowing everything. Now, if you've been an analyst for 5 years, maybe. But when you walk in the door out of undergrad, it's like you know something, and it's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much you don't know. Mm-hmm. And in order to learn, you have to be willing to ask the question. Mm-hmm. And the people who you're working for want you to ask the question. They would so much rather you go, okay, I think I understand this. If I explain it to you, can you tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong or I'm missing something? Being open to asking that is a great way to avoid making big mistakes. Mm-hmm. And it's also a great way to learn. Because you are going to the person who has the expertise and asking them to help you understand something better. That means you're learning something. And that is so important when you're starting your career. The other thing I guess I would say is, just be willing to engage. You learn a lot by just going to see people, making contacts in the market, reaching out to brokers, or reaching out to, other analysts that you may know. To ask the questions or try to understand what do they do. That helps you understand how you might be able to build those resources. Mm-hmm. So I don't think being outgoing is really important because fundamentally I'm an introvert, mm-hmm. but I don't have a real problem, reaching out to ask the question. And that was really important in order for me to be able to do my job. Mm-hmm. So always do that. Amazing. And that's a skill that you actually will find is incredibly valuable through your entire career.
Colette, thank you so much for being with us today. We've learned so much from your wisdom and knowledge, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future and watching your career as you continue to grow in commercial real estate.